edition of Community Conversations. This is the turn of North Richmond and Kew. We're very pleased to see so many people here to take part in this conversation with your local councillors. My name is Paul Jennings and I'm the CEO of Local Habitats and Heritage. We work with community groups such as the Friends of Parks, smaller neighbourhood associations, to improve the environment through looking at nature conservation but also heritage structure as well. So welcome, here is your independent chair and I will be keeping the meeting to time, hopefully, making sure that we get through all of the various issues that have been raised in advance of this meeting. So please don't mind if I have to move us on at certain stages to make sure that we get everything covered. So the point of the community conversation is basically the Council's community engagement programme, and it's one aspect where there's a series of events hosted by your local ward councillors, and the opportunity to discuss the local issues, not hyper-specific personal issues, but issues local to your particular ward, and for you to raise any questions, concerns, and to start that conversation. And I really want to emphasise that point, is it's not meant to be adversarial, it's about a conversation amongst people sharing views honestly, but being respectful of one another and hopefully moving forward in our dialogue. So I'd like at this stage to ask the councillors to introduce themselves, and if I could start at the end.
Thank you. My name is Katie Mansfield. I'm a councillor in St Margaret's, but I'm here is because I'm leading on the Richmond Town Centre work for the council.
I'm Councillor Nancy Baldwin. I represent North Richmond, but I'm also the spokesman for communities, equalities and the voluntary sector.
I'm Claire Volham, Councillor for Kew.
I'm Richard Warren, the Councillor for North Richmond.
And good evening, my name is Alexander Avon. I'm Councillor for St Margaret's and North Twickenham, the surrogate, as it were, Kew and North Richmond Council, but Chair of Richmond's Transport and Air Quality Committee.
And we have a few apologies this evening from Councillor Richard Pine, Councillor Alice Bridges-Westcott, and Councillor Ian Craigie. So some of the other councillors. A few other things to mention in terms of housekeeping. I'd love to welcome Gabby, who is going to be the BSL interpreter in the room this evening. She will at one stage need to have a short break, roughly in the middle. At that stage, for people joining us online, you will be able to access our closed captions, and we will be circulating the written notes from this meeting afterwards. So if anything is missed, you will be able to pick it up at those points. Also, just for safety, the fire exits, we're not planning to have a fire drill this evening, so if any alarms do sound, it's the real deal. So the door you came in is the most logical fire exit, which we'd encourage people to use. Should that be blocked, you can exit through here, turn to the right and follow the corridor through to the car park. I'd also like to point out that should you need to use the toilet, there are just down the corridor there, ladies and gentlemen's loos. I've mentioned that I'm the independent chair to this meeting, so as I said, not affiliated with the council members here, but I do work with the council to improve the environment. In terms of our agenda this evening, we've got a lovely kind of packed agenda, so we will need to move quite quickly through it. We've got our priority themes for discussion, which were circulated in advance. They're going to be on Richmond Town Centre, developments in the ward, waste and recycling management, and then the tow path from Kew to Richmond. After that, we will enter into open discussion for 40 minutes, and that is where people who have attended have submitted some things they would like to ask questions about, so we'll invite you to do that, and the councillors have had some preparation in thinking about those issues, but that will be your opportunity to raise things that are important to you. A quick note on microphones. It is important for the people in the room who might be slightly impaired of hearing, and for people online so that they get a good audio, that we use our microphones. That applies to the panel members, and it also applies to people in the audience. There will be a roving microphone. Please don't let it, just hold it like an ice cream, I've been told to tell you, so that it's close to your mouth and all of your words will be captured. They will also be providing advice when they bring the microphone round to you, so please don't worry. So we're going to start with our first item on the agenda, which is our themes discussions. We'll have an hour for this, and of the 4 different themes, there will be 15 minutes for each theme. Each theme is going to have a 2-minute introduction delivered by one councillor, and then approximately 15 minutes for residents to raise concerns and discuss with councillors their thoughts before we move on to the next theme. At the end, there will be a more general discussion time, and that's where items should be raised that aren't related to the themes. If you are attending virtually, can I ask you that you make sure that your questions that you ask are related to the theme that is in discussion at that time? And then if you have any general questions you want to raise, please save that for the discussion at the end of the evening. So, let's start with our first theme. It is Richmond Town Centre, and I'll hand over to Councillor Mansfield for her 2-minute introduction.
Thank you. So while I'm doing the introduction, I'll take you back a little bit and talk to you about why we're doing what we're doing, what we've already done, and what we're planning to do going forward, and then into any questions that you have for me. So firstly, we all know Richmond Town Centre has been a great town centre for a very long time. There's many people around the country who would be absolutely delighted to live in a place like Richmond with a town centre like Richmond. But like every other high street, every other town centre, we have our challenges because essentially the needs from the high street are changing. People want to do different together to try and create the space that we really want in Richmond Town Centre.
Great, thank you. Question here from the gentleman in the black jacket.
Thank you. I know that across the country, all town centres, particularly on region, have got a lot of challenges. We know what the economy's like. But as a very strong coffee aficionado, is there any limit to the number of coffee shops that can be opened on the high street?
Well, do you know what? The limit comes in naturally when if there's too many, people won't use them, and that's when we see places shutting down. In actual fact, Richmond Town Centre has a vacancy rate of only 7.8%, which is really, really good for a town centre in the country. The average in London is over 10%, and the average around the country is much higher. But it does have to be, in that, there has to be linked to demand, and if people are going to coffee shops and people are setting them up because people are going to them, that will happen. But we do want to talk to the landlords, and we do want to talk to the retailers about how can we make it a broader and be what people want. We've got that feedback now, so the first bit was to say this is what people want, and then we can start having those conversations, because it's important to listen so we have the conversations.
Got a question over here.
Thank you. Is there any thought been given to making the main road through Richmond more better shared space? Because at the moment it varies between 2 and 1 lanes. There's often buses. It would require some regulation about delivery time for lorries. But at the moment pedestrians regularly are walking in the road, stepping off the pavement. It feels to me it could be much nicer and safer, probably, if it was a better shared space.
Yeah, and that has to be a consideration based on the feedback that we've been getting. We are looking at what we need to do with the high street. There's a range of constraints with regard to the high street, so we're looking at what is possible, but it is absolutely under consideration, along with a number of other alternatives, because we've got the TfL buses going through Richmond Town Centre, and we can't just not have TfL buses going through. We have to work with TfL, we have to plan, we have to look at what the options are in terms of it being a route that can be used. But absolutely, the feedback we got in the engagement was very clear that people want something different to happen on George Street. They want to be able to use the space as leisure space. We also know that it's one of the places in the borough want to particularly increase or improve air quality. So it is an aspiration to make a big difference there. What it's going to be has to be worked through over the years to find the right solution for this area.
I've got 2 questions. First one at the back, please.
Thank you. Congestion in the middle of Richmond is frequently caused by large lorries unpacking, packing goods going in and out of the shops. This leads to traffic jams. It never seems to me that there's anybody there sort of monitoring this or trying to get the vans to on.
Councillor that wants to respond to that.
Well, okay, but I hear you because I've had to deal with it a little bit. Many of these shops have arrangements where these lorries aren't allowed to stop and unload at those times, and it's when these deliveries ignore those time frames. So what I would say is, if you're seeing this sort of happen, please contact us at the council, and we can try to make sure that they're keeping to the times that they're meant to be keeping to, because if it's happening in rush hour, a particular one that I was working on was on Friar Style Road on top of Richmond Hill, right school, and ridiculous times because they weren't keeping to the plan. And that's what we have to do, is make sure that they keep to the plan.
So I think there's two parts to this actually. What you're saying is that they're not keeping to what the law and what the rules are at the moment. And if that's the case, you should phone in. There's a number to call the enforcement officers out, that they should be keeping to the rules that we have at the moment. But there's a second part, which is what are we going to do in the future and what's the vision. Because if you look at our third placemaking, or the third pillar that we have, it's about environmental sustainability. And we do have to look about the best way of dealing with deliveries going forward for the centre. And we do consider different options that are there.
Sorry, can we raise our hands? And did you want to come back?
I understand that, but why should it be up to us to call a law enforcement officer? I don't know who it is.
Oh, no, sorry, it's traffic enforcement for Richmond Council. There is a number you can call for them. The reality is we can't be everywhere. I mean, things happen when people aren't there monitoring it. The enforcement officers are having to spread themselves across the borough and go to different places, but they're not going to see everything. It will need to be called in. It's not up to you to enforce it, but it helps us get to a place where we can be in the right place at the right time.
I think Councillor Manuel.
Yeah, no, I just underline the point. Look, we're not transposing the obligation onto residents, but your observations and your intelligence help to feed the deployment of the way that the officers are able to go about their business. One of the challenges, just to put up with enforcement though, is that these vehicles have to be observed for a period of time before they can actually receive a ticket as well. So it is not the easiest thing to enforce. What we need to do is we need to get more compliant behaviour underlying the business operations going on in Richmond. And I see it frequently myself. It's a known issue, and I recognise it. And I think part of the Richmond Town Centre solution is obviously looking to resolve that going forward too.
Thank you for raising that. I think you wanted to comment on this issue.
Could I just ask a question? Is there a notice anywhere telling us? Sorry, is there a notice anywhere telling us what times they can load and unload? So how would we know if they're breaking the rules?
All of Richmond Town Centre is appropriately signed and aligned with the parking and loading restrictions.
But there are double yellow lines all along. So are you saying they're never allowed to load and unload?
I don't want to necessarily go into all the detail of what is and isn't permitted in individual locations, but the lining and signing is compliant with DFT guidance, and all drivers should be aware of it.
But they're all.
I think it might be something that we can look at what we can put online though in terms of what's available, because it is something that if you're finding it, it's compliant, but if you're finding it difficult to find the information, we should take that away and look at what we can do in the online environment.
Thank you. Is this on the same issue? So just the last point on this issue, and then we'll move on to the questions at the back, just at the front here.
Could you have a dialogue, please, with the bus drivers? Because the bus drivers can tell you where they are when they are stuck in traffic, where a large lorry is. They can report it to their controller. Their controller could coordinate the information, and their controller could call your enforcement officer.
Okay, I'm hearing from a number of people about the issues with the deliveries in Richmond Town Centre, so I do think it's something that we need to take away and get the enforcement officers to do, and to see whether there can be some greater presence for a period of time here.
Thank you. We've got minutes left on this theme, so there were a couple of questions at the back. Thank you.
Hi, is there anything the council could do to pressurise landlords to have something a bit more interesting in the shops in Richmond? Following on from, I'm fed up of all the coffee shops. I was in Barnes recently, and there's lots of small independent businesses there. And why is that? Why is Richmond so boring?
Well, that's exactly what we're trying to deal with now, is that we do want to make changes going forward, and we do want to talk to landlords. Look, it's not going to be easy. The size of the retail units in Richmond is bigger than the ones in Bath, which means that you tend to get larger retailers coming in. But we do need to engage in conversations with the landlords if we want to make Richmond a success going forward. We cannot make landlords do something. The laws are not there to say you've got to kind of change the products that are being sold within your retail unit, or you have an independent retailer or not. What we can do is we can engage in those conversations and try to talk to them about how we think it would be more profitable for them to have the right products out there that we want to go to and that we now know based on the evidence we've been getting.
Thank you. I think, was there one other question before the gentleman there? I think the lady at the back.
There's a few things we can expect this year to change in the high street. I just wondered what those were.
Yeah, so we've got, there's a few things this year. There's 3 things that we want to do this year, and we're trying to work out how we can do them. The first is we've had a lot of space and have it more interesting for people to do things. We're going to be doing a few, we call them activations, but they're little things like we can make a bit of area. It could be a temporary playground for children. We need to work out before we make anything permanent what is working in terms of what people want and where it should be. So we're going to look at that this year. There's also a number of projects that require a small amount of capital investment, and we're looking at the feasibility of those in the hope that we can do 2 to 3 of them over the next year. And the final one is we're looking at trying to create an event, a festival, one day in the autumn to try and bring life to Richmond and show actually how much culture we've got, how much kind of interesting things going on. We want to bring it out from being in the buildings out into the street. Now that's being looked at in terms of feasibility at the moment. We'd like to, but we're not sure we're going to be able to. So it's kind of watch this space. We're going to be updating the website over the next few months, and we'll make sure that we're communicating about it. But those are the things we'd like to do this year.
Thank you. I've got time for one very quick, and the gentleman over the back has had his hand up for quite a while.
Thank you. I'm just going to pick up on the point about landlords. I mean, the council is clearly a landlord of the old town hall and of the libraries, and interested to know what you're to do with that, and in particular, the provision of public toilets.
So 2 separate points actually, but we have heard the provision of public toilets is something that people want from Richmond Town Centre, so that has to be looked at as well. Point on the town hall, absolutely. You're right. It's a building we own. It's not an easy building to make changes to because it's an old building with a lot of the development of it would cost a lot of money. So we need to work the best way of dealing with the town hall. But it is part of what we're looking at.
I was actually trying to link the two, so the provision of public toilets within the council's own property.
Well, it's quite interesting though that it wouldn't necessarily be the right space for the public toilets. That the engagement that we've been doing is where we're hearing where people want it. It's not necessarily in that area. But all of this is what we're looking at the moment. We've listened. We now know where we want to go, and we're creating those plans as to what should be done. So absolutely, it's on the table, but it might not be the right place for it.
And public toilets will be raised a little bit later this evening in the open discussion. I'm going to need to move on to the next theme, but if you want...
Okay, then. It's really important that you take part in the consultations and everything. We do have some QR codes back there. Please do sign up for the newsletter so that you can know when consultations are taking place and that your voice is heard. So I will encourage you to have a look at those QR codes. Make sure you're on as many newsletters as you're interested in receiving.
And apologies if you didn't get to ask your question right now, but the open discussion is a time also to revisit the themes if you'd like to. Our second theme of the evening is developments in wards, and Councillor Warren is going to give his 2-minute introduction on this theme.
Thank you. Now we have a number of developments going up, or maybe not going up, in North Richmond and Kew at the moment. There's one in particular that I know has caused a lot of concern with residents, and that is on 47 to 49 Lower Mortlake Road, where on the 10th of September 2024, 2 buildings collapsed during construction. Fortunately, nobody was injured, and we're very grateful to the police and the fire brigade for intervening so quickly. I want to be up to date on that because on the night that happened, the council stepped in and made the site safe. But since then, we've wanted to make it safer because a part of the buildings were still there. Now, what has happened is the council has given a notice to the developer to pull those down, and with agreement from the health and safety, a safe method of doing that was undertaken, and it has come down. And the excavations where they've been creating a basement, that has been filled in with the rubble from those walls. So that's one piece of good news, and Blue Anchor Alley has been reopened as well, which is the other good piece of good news. Now, the developer has been told that if they want to continue developing the site, they will have to put in a new planning application for that part of the site where the buildings collapsed. They're not particularly happy with that, but this is what will have to happen. Now, as regards the rest of the site, they still have planning permission to work on that. And what they have been doing is seeking approval of the causes of that collapse. It does not seem right that the developer should be allowed to carry on and go ahead with the developments when there has been such a catastrophe, quite frankly, on the site. And it's a remarkable that nobody got killed. I mean, some of you may have seen videos taken by the workmen who managed to escape.
Councillor Warren, can I...
Okay, well, I'll leave it there for now, and I've got some notes on the other developments if anybody wants to talk about those as well.
Thank you for that very in-depth discussion or information on a particular site. Questions from the floor? Again, invite your opinions, thoughts. Sorry, can you just wait for the microphone?
Could we have the planning number or the address again so we can look it up, that application?
Yes, I can't give it to you right now, but if you do have your email address, have you given it in the big in front? So you have it. Okay, we'll email it to you.
Thank you. Any other questions on developments in the borough? I see a hand at the back. Microphone, thank you.
May I ask the Councillor for Kew? I don't know if there's any of our wonderful members of the Committee of Kew Society here. Anybody? No. I think if they were here, they'd probably ask two big questions which interest people in Kew at the moment. One concerns Pensford Field, and I'm talking about there. And if you'd like to comment on that, I think that would be helpful. I think if you'd also like to comment on the attempts, very good attempts being made by people to do something making the station access to both sides, or particularly on the village side.
Yes, I mean, Pensford Field isn't a property development. I'm really more about London House and Home-Based Manor Road, Hotel Park, those developments, those building construction developments. In Pensford Field is a particularly Kew issue, and it's not a property development. As regards the station, it's not really a property development. That's a transport question, really. But I know it's one that's been going for a long time, and I think maybe the Councillor Kew.
I'm sorry. I'm afraid because of how it went, I didn't actually hear anything this gentleman said. You really have to speak right into the microphone, so...
Well, look, I think the thing is, they're not development questions.
No, we will be talking about something later.
Maybe later.
And do raise both those issues if you'd like in the open forum. Question with the man in the blue shirt, just get the microphone to you.
Yeah, you just mentioned London House and Kew Retail. Can you give us an update on that, please?
Yes, Kew Retail Park, the developer there, St George, has decided not to create a housing development there. Instead, they're going to liaise retailers who are currently there to talk about how they can improve it as a shopping destination. And London House, so there the developer started work last summer, but really they shouldn't have started quite so vigorously as they did because they had not met all of their planning conditions. So we asked the planning enforcement to go there and stop them from carrying on with their work, which eventually happened. The developer has now met their planning conditions, and is now allowed to carry on working, and I believe they have turned up there again and done a little bit of work. I'm not quite sure whether I'm now, but basically they can go ahead now as they were supposed to have done, yeah.
Gentleman at the front.
This is a general question about small-scale development rather than the large-scale you mentioned. Is there a council policy on basement conversions, adding particularly in terraced properties?
Well, you know, there's something I was once told, and that is planning officers like basements because you can't see them. Surveyors hate them because they don't think it's safe. And surveyors love rooftop extensions because they can be safe, because buildings are usually over-engineered and planning officers hate them. So it will come into planning. There is a planning policy on it. I can't tell you in detail what it is, but it certainly exists. I can, again, if I get your email address, I can point you in the direction of the policy will be on basements.
Yes, I mean, the problem is that it's not a planning issue in the sense that it's not something that's seen, as you mentioned. It's more of a building control issue because it has implications for adjoining properties and damage and settlement and that sort of thing. And it's less critical for detached properties, but certainly in other boroughs and more central London, somewhat like Kensington, for example, it is a real problem. People adding 1 or 2 story basements in terraced properties. And so that's why I asked whether there's a policy in...
Yes, I have planning policies in every aspect, really. I think the thing, where you touched on about the neighbours and so on, the Party Wall Act is what comes into play there. That's the overriding legislation, really, I think, which probably picks up on thinking about how it affects the neighbours.
Thank you. I've got time for a couple more questions on this theme. The lady in the white blouse.
Can you tell us what's happening with the home-based site?
I was dreading this question. I'll tell you why, because it's getting awfully complicated on one level. One level is incredible, nothing's happening. Why is the complicated question. So last May, the Mayor of London gave planning approval to the developer Avington. Now, nothing has happened since then. They have not submitted a construction plan as they would need to do before they can start work. What has been going on is one of the investors, the majority investor, had 70% of it, IGC Combo, planned to sell their 70% stake in December to an unknown buyer. I believe that's happened, although we don't know exactly whether it's happened. But we also know that the front person, if you like, Avington, Omer Weinberger, who's the director, he has distanced himself from his own company that owns that site. He had been a person of significant control. There is now another company that is a significant control company, and another one that control of the company further on. So he has also taken out a loan, a £25 million loan recently. This is in addition to what has already been publicised in the accounts a year or so ago. Forgive me, I can't remember which ones exactly. That's pointed out that £70 million worth of loans were already against the site. So there's a lot of money that's been borrowed. There's been some manoeuvring, buying and selling. I know the company's house was actually going to dissolve Avington. And then the next day changed his mind. I don't know what about exactly, but I know there have been their accounts, but I don't think that would have been the cause. But basically, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. I think what's my take on this is that Avington are desperately trying to make this work, but they have a lot of problems financially trying to make it happen. And they're trying to sort that out. And we have to wait and see. They have a maximum of years in which to do this. So basically, permission was given 10 months ago. They got 2 years and 2 months in which to sort this out, or they lose permission.
The gentleman in the blue shirt, sorry, I feel as though you had something specifically in relation.
Yeah, all that information is very interesting, but the key question is how long have they got? And you say 3 years. Is that 3 years to start building, or 3 years to submit their construction plan?
No, it's 3 years to start building.
And when do they have to submit their construction plan?
Well, I can't tell exactly when, but it would have to be ahead of that, and we need to give sufficient time to the council to decide whether or not that's practical.
Right, my questions are all to do with how long. I don't care what their accounts are doing and their loans. It's when will they lose their permission to build? Because then their site is worthless.
Well, May 2027.
So they start by May 2027?
Yes.
And they have to have a construction plan before that?
Yes.
And how long do they need to submit the construction plan before they start?
I don't know exactly how long they would need to do before they start.
Oh, well, that's the crucial point, as I see it, isn't it?
Well, let's put it this way: if they do it the day before the planning permission expires, it's not going to happen. At the end of the day, it's about what's reasonable. I'll have to ask. You see, it's a process. I don't know how long it takes to create a construction plan. It certainly doesn't take 3 years, and it doesn't take 3 years to decide on it. I don't really expect them to push it to the wire, to be honest with you. Either they're going to sell it to someone else who can build on it, or they aren't going to find the means to do it, or they're going to go insolvent. One of those three things.
Thank you. I'm going to take one last point from the lady at the front, because we did whip the microphone away from you.
There was another building, the one between, at the roundabout between Sandycombe Road and North Road. It was completed, and then the whole building was for sale, and now I've seen that they're trying to rent that out. Does that mean it's now safe? Because I understood it wasn't safe, and that's why nothing was happening.
This is what's called the Sandycombe Centre, and is now called Pector Heights. It's got its third owner right now. Again, insolvency has been a problem for previous developers. Granular Properties is the current owner, unless they've gone bust as well, but I think in December they were the owner. And yeah, Featherstone Lee had been marketing 3 of those 20 flats there. It's gone rather quiet, so ask council officers if they could look into this, because I'm a bit worried that it's going to slip away again and something has gone wrong. One thing I can tell you, we're asking the developer to pay council tax on those empty properties. Hopefully that might prompt them into actually doing something and getting these units sold. But yeah, we'll have to wait.
It is safe now. It has passed building regulations and everything.
Yes, I don't believe there's any problems with that. Yeah, I haven't heard of any problems.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Once again, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question on this thing, please do save it for the open discussion at the end. Moving on to our third theme, which is waste and recycling management. I'll ask Councillor Vollum in 2 minutes to introduce the topic.
Okay, well, I'll introduce it to say, well, why are we discussing waste recycling? Firstly, because it's very important to the council. It costs a lot of money to collect and process waste, and the more that we recycle, the better. It's also an issue close to my heart. My dad was a poor boy, as it were, who saved every paperclip, composted every apple core. If you didn't eat it, it was in, all of that. So it's a topic very close to my heart. And so the council did quite a lot to try and promote and increase recycling. So we have waste, electrical and recycling points. There's one in Kew Village. You can also put small items by your black box. 46 tonnes of electrical recycling have happened. And for anyone who went to the Eco Fair here last week, there were also tents with things like repair cafes to get people recycling stuff. The heaviest waste that we have is food waste, and people tend not to be very good at recycling food waste. All the stuff that you hear in the media, they buy too much, etc. But then when it goes into your ordinary waste bin, it just weighs a lot, produces a lot of gas, and is generally to be avoided. And so the council have been trying to do a few things. One is to introduce food recycling into flats, because one of the people in flats is where are you going to put stuff. The second quite common issue, I think why people don't do it, is because of foxes. So I asked a question about that in preparation for this. There are some trial boxes for proof if people have got a significant problem. However, we were to issue everyone with one of those if they work, which we'll trial, you then end up with a lot of plastic waste from the existing bins you've got. So whatever you do, there's a waste implication. And then a thing relating to planning is trying to ensure that when new builds are made, that actually proper storage and facilities for people to do their waste. My mum, for example, lives in a retirement living place, and they've got an amazing room where you can put all your waste, which really encourages people to do it, because if it's difficult or time-consuming, people don't do it. How am I doing with my two?
You're doing great.
Doing great.
Lovely.
Okay. I wanted to refer to the plant question and wastage of plants, because it's not strictly recycling, but I did want to mention for trees that we plant a lot of. There is an adopt a tree scheme so that people can adopt a tree, and to cover, the mileage, the volume of stuff, it does require sort of participation from people. What else was I going to say? We had our first Mega Skip event in Kew, and I think you probably had 2 in North Richmond already. We had 1 or 2 in which I think was St Margaret's.
Our next Mega Skip is on Saturday the 5th in Carrington Road. So if you're a North Richmondite, you want to get rid of some of your bulky waste, or you have furniture you want to recycle, bring it to Carrington Road, please.
And I must say, I was a bit sceptical about it, because I think, well, we've got Townmead Road in Kew, and people might want to ask questions about that. But actually it was a surprising success, and lots of people came out of the woodwork with lumps of furnishing things that they couldn't. And I also found out, while I was there, all sorts of things about Richmond Furniture Recycling Scheme. So there's a lot happening. Ways, do people know about it? Do they, and how do they participate? And the other issue that I asked before we came was, could we have a walk-in facility at Townmead Road? Because that's, but apparently that's not possible at the moment. But we are looking at mobile recycling centres. So in a way, I sort of feel it's over to you to say, what ideas have you got? What questions have you got? How can we recycle more in Kew and North Richmond?
Over to you. Right at the front, thank you.
We have
Sorry, just the microphone, thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That was really interesting. We have a food recycling bin, and you pull the handle over and it opens, and you pull the handle back, and if it's not too sort of old, that locks the lid, so the foxes can't get into it. Yeah, and some people haven't worked that one out yet, so maybe a bit of information.
Some of the foxes are clever though.
Yes.
They do. Some foxes have worked it out, I can assure you.
There's a gentleman at the back who's been trying to ask a question all evening.
This is about the blue boxes.
The poo.
The blue boxes.
We might be talking about the dog stuff. Maybe another topic.
Operatives will empty the blue boxes.
Yeah.
They won't what's beside it. You have written a contract which says empty the blue box.
Yeah.
What you should have done is write a contract saying collect the cardboard and paper. And that would get the cardboard that is not in the box because it's too big collected.
Mm-hmm.
After the collection, nowadays, you see cardboard strewn on because the guys wouldn't collect it.
Yes, yeah, I don't know if about that.
I think, and I would have to double check this with officers, I think they're instructed that if they're underneath or near that blue box, they're meant to collect it. I do know that with my own, I've had a few complaints myself, and I've had crews go back and collect that, even though it hadn't fitted into the blue box in the first instance. So I would I'll double check that if you want me to, but I think the instruction is to the crews that if it's by the blue box, if it's underneath it, they are meant to collect it.
Yes, I would like you to check that, please.
Yeah,
The other thing
can you
is,
and I meet afterwards, and you can give me your email address and everything?
the blue box collectors put the stuff in a red transfer box on wheels. And if your big button doesn't fit in that, they leave it.
And can I say on the reporting, because it kind of relates to the question about sort of enforcement on, you know, unloading and loading lorries. But enforcement is a big issue about all sorts of things, but there is a report and issue thing on the council website, and then if people will keep reporting it and nothing happens, then they report it to me and I contact the contract manager. And actually we do have good people there, and always they know, you know, which lorry was where on which day, so they can pick out, because sometimes there's a sort of, somebody goes round and they tick all the block out, and you walk down the road and there's bits of plastic everywhere. Some days some weeks it's really good and the whole place is tidy, another week it isn't. But if they come along and make a real mess, you can report it, and the more that you report it, the more, firstly, they identify if there's a rogue sort of team. Secondly, they can send them out to actually clear up. So the system does work. And thirdly, it then feeds into the contract management system, so that then we can say, well, actually, X number of complaints, the next number of reports, etc. So I know it's a bit onerous, but it does work.
And it is possible to have a street on a special watch where officers will go and check crews who have been reported that they haven't been doing their job properly, are actually doing their job properly. I go back to what this gentleman said, you know, why is it down to us to have to do everything? And it's because we can't be everywhere. But if you engage us as councillors, we're very happy to escalate these things. But it's helpful if you start reporting first, because then we can document behavior, and we can evidence what's going on, and we can go a little bit further and escalate it that bit more.
Could I just have one small bit in parenthesis as well, which is the gentleman's last point about the sort of cardboard not being collected. I do think it is required that residents are asked to break down their cardboard so that it is as flat and compact as possible. I do think, from my understanding of hearing about the contract, I'm not directly in control of it, but that actually oversized, non-broken down cardboard will be left, because it means that the operative will have to do that work, and that will break down the amount of time that they have to take doing the round.
Can I go to the lady in the green cardigan and followed by the man in the black jacket?
Hello. I know your example of a skip where people have to take their large items to be recycled, whatever. It predisposes that people have access to a car in which they can transport it. We were in Sydney last November and have a scheme whereby, I think it's once a month, you can put your large items out on the street, and the council will come round up those large items. And it seems to, I'm talking to my brother-in-law, it seems to work very well. You can get rid of large items. You know, people are very easily, you know, if he can't transport it, it's too large for his small car. You know, your skip idea means you've got to transport it, put it out on the street, it can be picked up.
I think you can organise a collection of large items from the council.
Yes, you do have to pay for that.
No, but this is something that happens once a month. Walk around the street the day of collection, there's actually things out on the pavement and people are actually swapping themselves, and then in the morning it all goes away.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting different schemes that you can have. So I was in New York City recently visiting family, and on a Saturday morning, there are big bins put out, and everybody brings their food waste bags down and puts it in it, and then they can take away broken down compost that has been made from that food waste. And these are all people in high rises in the middle of Manhattan doing this, and so there are interesting things. So that's why we'd love to hear ideas on things we can do. So, you know, there's some interesting things going on.
Great. Last question on this topic.
Thank you. First of all, following on from the gentleman was talking about the cardboard. Yes, I'm experiencing difficulties with cardboard. I have to sort of congratulate the council for the fact that not far from where I live, they produce some of these big bins on the corner of a street. You can go and put large, bulky items. I think it is sometimes down to personal responsibility that if you've got a really, really big piece of cardboard, even with the best one in the world, you aren't going to get it close to being in the blue box, and taking it and getting rid of it is a good thing. The corollary to that is, can we make sure that these big bins are emptied fast enough that they don't then in themselves become an eyesore and an attraction for nefarious activity?
Yeah. There's somebody.
Yeah, thank you for that, sir. Harriet, sorry, can we just have the mic to the front, please?
Hi. I live on the Kew Riverside, right next to the town mead site, and as you mentioned, you can't walk in, so I never actually use it. But if you come on a bike, they require you to book beforehand. And so
it seems it is extreme.
Yeah, and if you just want to drop bulbs off or something like that, you can't unless you own a car to get in there. Is there a way this could be changed?
So that's what I put in, because a lot of people have asked that. So I have asked about it, and I think you get the sort of health and safety argument about it of people wandering about when there's all those big lorries and dangerous stuff, but I totally agree. And I did speak to Julian Eden Watts, who chairs the Environment Committee, and they are trying to find a solution, I think, but there isn't one as yet. But I do agree with you there.
If I might as well on that, I mean, I have been working, and I hope there will be a solution that might allow for special access for bikes and cargo bikes, so that we can incentivise active travel to the site, and that would ideally come without the need to book slots. So, but it is important to emphasise, please, if you do want to come by bike, it's not impossible. It is permitted, but you do, as you mentioned, have to have a booking.
Councillor Wallen, thank you very much for that. We turn to our final theme of the evening, which is the towpath from Kew to Richmond, and I'll hand over to Councillor Aaron.
Well, thank you. I'm intending on taking up the 2 minutes, because I think the towpath is sort of self-evidently an issue. Back on the 19th of October last year, the towpath began to collapse due to a combination of heavy rain and extreme winds. As we've discovered, there's quite a significant level of engineering weakness in that particular section of towpath. And the council have had to devote considerable resource to evaluating not just the area that's collapsed, but the area near to it, both in terms of its resilience and its ability to be able to sustain the work that needs to follow to reinstate it. Now, that is not, unfortunately, for the council, and therefore for council taxpayers, it's not a cheap financial envelope associated with it either, which I'll touch on. But the work has happened at pace. Land around the site which collapsed is not wholly in Richmond Council's ownership. There are various parties with responsibility, including the PLA and others. But the council has decided, quite rightly at a political level, that we would not get drawn into protracted conversations about the rights and wrongs of land ownership, because the amenity needs reinstatement as quick as humanly possible. So lots, as I say, lots and lots of necessary investigative work has happened. Unfortunately, with serious contingencies within there, the envelope of spend is in the millions to reinstate this particular area. Everything is on track in terms of necessary permissions and requirements at this stage for us mobilising at the planned time we had anticipated of this month, in fact, later this month. And all being well with the works, we aim to complete the reinstatement of that section by the end of the summer. And I use that advisedly, because if I say by the end of July or whatever and there's slippage, that will disappoint some. Politically, summer's last a bit longer than August sometimes too with projects. But we are working at quite considerable pace on quite a sophisticated project. And I know to many it will seem perhaps quite straightforward, but require piling, sheet piling and other activity, and an awful lot of the material and expertise is unique and will need to be brought by boat to the site, given the weakness of the towpath itself to sustain load. And we've also done some preliminary evaluation of the nearby network to know that when we reinstate this area, we don't experience any immediate issues with any other adjacent sections. What it underlines, I think, critically, is the council was right in the the council was right, the political party that is the council was right in the last election in making a priority the towpath network, devoting funds and a process to reviewing the towpath network. I think to a certain extent though the blowout here has set back a little of aspiration, if I'm honest, within the council, because while our original endeavour was to look to significantly improve the towpath network in the borough, I think now, given the cost we've incurred here from this unpredicted blowout, but also from the need to make sure that the entire network is functioning and safe and able to be sustained for the long-term future of borough residents, the first steps will be doing just that. And it will, unfortunately, I think, be a secondary activity about looking about the upgrades and improvements thereafter that can be made. We have to obviously have a towpath before we can make it better. So it is in hand, it is a priority, it is undesired and unwanted, but the council is taking it incredibly seriously. And at that point, I open it up to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Do you want to start off, Councillor?
I just wanted to add something to Alex's 2 minutes, which is that I chair a group which is called the Thames Strategy to Kew to Chelsea, which is involves all the boroughs that are along the river, both sides, from Kew to Chelsea, with a view to try to have consistent approach between all the boroughs and to identify where we can make improvements, where we can apply for funding, put benches in and those sort of things. And that is also part of a huge Thames project which runs the length of it, which is all about flood resilience and making sure that we're planning for rising tides, rising rivers, changes to the way the Thames barrier operates, and that's a project which Julian Eden-Watts, who's chairs on behalf of the boroughs, yes, our neighbouring boroughs as well. So it's just to let you know that's happening, and there is quite a lot of work that happens generally to support the fantastic river and its environment.
Can I just add, just in case you think we don't care about the river above Kew, there is a Thames Landscape Strategy group that goes from Kew up to
East Molesey.
So, I mean, the entire thing is being looked at in terms of how we can make sure that the river stays a living river. I think that's part of the big thing, and that we're putting in resiliencies in terms of flooding. And so this is, I know this is something dear to your heart, Mr. Jennings.
It is.
You're very involved in that as well.
Councillors is seconded to the Thames Landscape Strategy to work on it. Open the floor. Is there any kind of questions or comments or observations from the audience? Gentleman at the front, microphone's just coming.
Well, Richard's expecting this question, and it's the section you were talking about of the towpath is probably one of the longest sections without any direct access. So from Kew Green to Richmond Lock, it's 2.6 miles, and there's no access to the towpath. And I've been in discussion with Richard over the last few months, and the proposal has been taken up by our MP Sarah Orney, and the idea is that there should be a footpath connecting Kew to the Thames path, and the location ideally would be next to, as you all know, the Lion Gate. There's a service road that's a quarter mile long and goes up to the side entrance, the service entrance of Kew Gardens. And the proposal is that a half-mile footpath from the end of that service road to the Thames path is created. And that would mean that all the people in Central Kew and North Sheen would suddenly get access to the towpath, and it would arrive at just about the location where the breach is now. It would not only give more opportunity for circular walks, but also emergency escape route during flooding, and also emergency access for paramedics who could reach the middle of that section of the path without trying to travel 1.5 miles from either Richmond or Green. So my question is not really to Richard, because I know he's been acting on my behalf and supporting this proposal. I'm really throwing out the question to the audience and seeing his reaction about whether people generally would actually like to have direct access to it with this new footpath.
Chair, can I just add a bit of context, because I think it's very interesting to hear the reaction and hear more, but I think it's really important to say one of the things when this blowout happened on the towpath was we did have a very quick exercise in recognising what should we be doing something different here. We spent a lot of time on it because quite clearly that delayed the reinstatement, and amongst other things, and as I said to you before we came up on stage that we were here, you know, I went in and saw the golf course about this proposal and discussed it with them. I think it's fair to say, unless Richard wants to say different, I think the golf course have some reservations about that approach. Supportive though I'm sure it is by residents here. And I think the challenge, and I'm interested in views on it, the challenge is how might we get to a situation where the landowner, because the council don't have any sort of direct powers over obviously a private landowner, or a leasee in this case, how do we get to a situation where those challenges are overcome in such a way that they might be more amenable? There's no doubt though that the towpath blowout has exposed quite how significant a length of towpath there is there without any alternative access. And I think it's the councillors' view, the MP's view, and it's certainly my view, that it would be a very desirable thing to have. But unfortunately, it's not entirely in our gift, given that the land ownership doesn't reside with the council. But interesting view.
Thank you. Any other questions? Gentleman at the front here. Just wait for the microphone, please.
Yes, I want to support the previous speaker. The idea of a footpath from Kew Road along the border between Kew Gardens and the golf course. There's the golf course side where the path would be down to the Thames towpath, and also it's got to realise that towpath is part of a national path, Thames Path, all the way from the Thames barrier at Charlton, way up to beyond Oxford. So there's a missing link there, and there are one or two other places along the Thames, a bit beyond Greater London, where there are schemes in the Surrey County Council area, certainly between Molesey and Staines, where there are various schemes for new stretches of waterway to avoid flooding, and that may impinge on the it's outside our constituency, but or boroughs. That's got to be thought about as well.
I think lots of valid points to consider. I just would like to go to we have a question online.
Thank you. Before I ask the question, sorry, just to remind the audience that we've got people online. If you don't use the mic, they can't hear you, and on the live stream, they won't be able to hear your question. So we've got a comment here from a member of the public saying a new footpath from the Lion Gate to the Thames towpath would be a great idea. Could the Crown Estate freeholders be consulted?
But, I mean, Richard, you go first. Go on.
Sure, thank you. So what the Crown Estate's position basically is, what does the people who are leasing the land about this? They want their lessees to be happy, so it's really down to the golf club. So at the moment, who we have in favour is very much the Kew councillors, the North Richmond councillors, the Kew Society, local residents, the Environment Committee. There's a lot of support for this. It is really about persuading golf club, and their concerns are about injuries and insurance claims, and also about trespassing. Now there are solutions, and this has been discussed and has been put to the golf club, but they are going to take some persuading, and essentially that is what's going on at the moment. We were trying to reassure them that this could be a good idea for them as well, and absolutely about it being an escape route from the towpath. Having been caught out on that towpath myself with the rising waters and having to wade through to Richmond Lock, it would be very nice to be able to get out another way when you're caught in those situations that people often are.
I'd just add, I mean, the council, the councillors, the MP all seem aligned on this being a good idea. I think what we need to do is mobilise a body of support that can exert positive and constructive influence on the golf course.
Question at the back, the man in the blue blazer.
On the business of getting from Kew Road to the towpath, and that road is actually Oxenhouse Lane, it gets misnamed. For those who don't know, I was a councillor for North Richmond, and this has been bubbling away for probably about 25 years now, as an idea. And one thing that's only half-heartedly been pursued, whether or not the path could actually go through the entrance to Kew Gardens and actually go that route. I mean, obviously it doesn't work for vehicles, but it does work for pedestrians. Now, I had a conversation with Richard Deverell many years ago, and he wasn't completely averse to that idea.
That is an alternative proposal. I know the golf course would certainly prefer.
I'm going to take just one more question on this issue before we go into the open forum, and ask the lady in the green.
Thank you. I know that obviously the cost of repairing the brake is immense, but I've been living in Kew since the early 1980s, and the surface of the towpath from Rich Lock up to Hammersmith Bridge has deteriorated quite considerably during those 40 years. That's why, and I know, any plans to think about resurfacing at any time?
So there are definitely thoughts, is the truth. I mean, look, in a parallel world where this blowout had not occurred and £2 or £3 million potentially was available to the council, I would have said that was right up there as a priority for the towpath network. I know how bad the condition is at running that route quite frequently. I think the challenge is, will we now, given the amount we've had to contribute to this specific unexpected issue, with the resource in the near term to do as much as we might have liked to do along that stretch? And I think the answer is probably not. One of the challenges, and I don't want to elongate, the challenges here is that when it comes to road resurfacing and pavement repairs, which we are devoting significant amounts of resource to, we're also usually supported in upgrades and improvements for pedestrians and cyclists by Transport for London funding. But Transport for London funding never prioritises the towpath network. They consider it, I mean, I generalise, but a sort of easy option for us to be devoting resource to it. Also, of course, not all boroughs have as much in the network. And so one of the issues is outside funding in terms of providing a transport amenity for walkers, runners, cyclists is non-existent unless this council itself, and therefore council taxpayers, reach into their pocket. But I think the area is well known to be in need of work. It will be a priority as soon as funds are available, but I think in the near term the prospect of those funds doesn't look quite as strong as I might have hoped.
I realise I promised there was a gentleman who had a question, right? You're okay. If you've got other questions around the towpath repair, then please do raise them in the kind of open discussion section that we're about to move into. In the interest of keeping us to time, we're about 3 minutes over, so apologies for that. But we now have about 40 to 45, 50 minutes for open discussion questions. I do have one question. Is this online related to this issue? Let's go online to our residents there.
Thank you. So we've got 2 questions. Sorry, they came in late after the presentation, so I thought if we take these 2 first. There's one on the town centre plan and there's one on waste collection. The first one, it says that Richmond Green was not included in the town centre plan. Could more be made of this community resource?
It is part of the town centre plan. I'm not sure where they have that information. It goes up as far as Deer Park car park, it goes down to the river, it goes along the river to Richmond Hill, and it goes around the back of the shops as well, and it includes the shops on Kew Road, so it is.
That's great, thank you. And there's another question. After waste collection, there is so much rubbish down every street, especially in the wind. Under the bushes that run along the railway in North Road, there is a huge amount of unsightly plastic. Could we not have recycling bins that close?
Well,
I think you can order nets.
You can order nets. This is what the expectation is, that you order a net. When you get your box, you order a net so that you put your plastic and glass in, and then you put the net over it. And that's it. Now, that is the expectation. I don't know if they need some help getting that. They're very welcome to contact their local councillor and we can help get that sort of thing. But I hear what you're saying, absolutely.
Great. If I open up to the audience here, maybe in relation to some of the themes that you didn't get a chance to answer your question. Gentleman with the maroon top.
Thank you. A question for Councillor Richard Warren. We have a little problem that is an ongoing problem around the corner from me where there are some Richmond housing houses where there is one vulnerable lady who seems to be constantly besieged by drug addicts. Our corner is now drug dealing central. I've had many meetings with the police about it. We wonder what can be done. Are you, the councillors, able to exert any pressure on RHP about this? I think you know the one we're talking about in Brandon Road, perhaps already, Councillor Warren. I've also spoken to Sarah Olney about it, so I wanted to get your views before saying anything further. Thank you.
Yes, I may have been receiving some emails about this recently, yes. Okay, so what I've done is I've contacted the police and the landlord and the council's community safety officer about this, because if it is the right property, there's a number of issues. There's the lease, for example. Is other people in breach of the lease? Then there is, of course, the legal aspects, criminal legal aspects to this. And I understand it's not just in that property, it's in the wider area. So I've gone to the police about it, and I know that people have been reporting to them. And I've said, look, what are we doing about this? I would also encourage people to come to the next police liaison group meeting, where this was discussed previously when that particular property was given a closure order, and it seemed to sort of deal with it then. So, yes.
All of everything else around was that.
Yeah. So it needs to go through the process again. So what I suggest is, I've already asked if this could go on to the next agenda for the police group meeting, and they said yes, it's in June. I would, if you and your neighbours, I would definitely suggest coming along. When I know exactly which day it's going to be, I can let you know. But I think it's a good opportunity to really have a good conversation about this, because the police are there, the councillors are there, the community safety are there, and you can make that point. Obviously before then, because it's 2 months away, we can keep asking and saying, well, what's going to happen here? But it is, ultimately, the police have to do what they've got to do. We can simply tell them, please, can we...
Yes, the police have explained in my front room on a number of occasions and on the street and to members a lot, because there are people on the local WhatsApp group who continue complaining about it. Nobody seems to be able to do anything about it. The police say they are powerless. We are told by the council that we must report it to the police. We report endlessly to the police can't do anything. There are people staying there who claim that they are just coming to be their friend. But this was going on before you closed the place, and now she's back, and it's happening again. We believe the lady herself is vulnerable. She needs to be supported, perhaps moved out. But without that solution taking place, and without you, shall we say, nudging RHP in that direction, nothing will happen. The police told us they cannot help it.
Yeah, so sorry.
I was just going to say, Councillor Mansfield wants to come in, but do you want to go first? And then there's a gentleman at the back who's very keen to comment on this issue as well.
Okay, I'll just quickly make a couple of points. I know CCTV has been mentioned, I've raised that as well as an option. I'm very concerned that the police have told you they feel powerless, and I will take that up with them and ask them why they feel powerless, because they shouldn't think that.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yes, they visit three times a day, and they can't do anything about those people. They can't arrest anyone, their crimes have been committed. These are the issues. And by the way, they also told me the CCTV turned out to be useless because they actually used that for convicting anybody.
I will get you, sir. Councillor Mansfield.
Yeah, we had an issue like this in St Margaret's previously. We brought it up through the police liaison group, and we created a working group with the police. In this instance, also include RHP and the community safety officers at the council. and we came to a resolution. But I think you need all of those people in the room to get to that place. I think we should take it away and possibly arrange that group.
And the gentleman.
Excuse me. I'm also the councillor for Mortlake and Barnes Common, and the issue you've raised is very prominent there, and it's also been a prominent issue in Barnes. And what some local residents did is they took photographs of people coming to these particular doors and took the time. And if you can give that kind of detail, it's incredibly important for the police and for the housing associations. We've got the evidence. It's not always clear evidence, but it can eventually be used in a court, particularly supporting the county. This is a nuisance situation, and action be taken, not necessarily on someone called drug dealing, but on a nuisance factor.
Thank you, sir. Like Councillor Mansfield, it's so useful to hear of previous examples that have been resolved or found a way forward. I have a question from the lady here.
Thank you very much. My question is about Pensford Field. As I think probably a lot of people in the audience know. Okay, my question is about Pensford Field. I think a lot of people in the audience know it's a very current issue locally. So there are in fact 3 questions that we'd like to raise this evening on the topic, which are all related. So if I may ask mine first, please. How is it possible that 6 months on from when we were first told about the termination of the lease of Pensford Field, we now find out that the decision to award a lease to Dose of Nature hasn't yet been made, even though we were told on numerous occasions that there was no time to hold proper consultation, and at the council meeting on the 3rd of December 2024, leaders said that the decision to award the lease of Pensford Field to Dose of Nature wasn't a key decision because it didn't impact on 2 wards. It wasn't considered controversial at the time it was made. The question is, how is it possible that 6 months on from when we had our notice to terminate the new lease, the decision to award the new lease to Dose of Nature hasn't yet been formally made?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think the whole thing does seem to be rumbling on. And I can assure you that I'm doing my best to try and move things on as quickly as possible. I think we can get into into the semantics of it, but it always seemed to me that actually what the council announced was its intention to award the lease, and I think it wasn't clear to me ever that it actually. That, you know, you can say that that's your intention, but actually in order to award a lease you have to develop the terms of the lease, because you can't award the terms without issuing it, and the terms of the lease have been discussed at a couple of meetings that have happened between Pensford Field and the council and Dose of Nature, with a lot of the concerns that Pensford Field Environmental Trust have got, such as somebody, I think, raised the planning issue. You know, there's a fear that building's going to be put there, and this was discussed at a meeting that we've recently had, and the council, there are very strict restrictions on what you can build on an environmental land, and the council to go back and talk to the planning department to find out what is or isn't allowed. But rest assured, there isn't going to be a great big building on Pensford Field, and another concern that people have is that that if something did go there, which I don't think it will, that then sets a precedent for more development. The council's argument for that is that actually if you have a dual purpose of field being used for the benefit of the environment and the benefit of the charity, that actually that secures it more, makes the field more secure for any potential the government, you know, Sadiq Khan coming along and saying, where's all your land? Well, here's a piece of land, what are you doing with it? And actually, if we can say, well, it's being used as an environmental trust as well as a mental health charity, that protects the land well.
Is that on this particular question that was raised? Just wait for the microphone, sorry.
Actually, I've got 3 questions.
Well,
One is for Councillor Mansfield. Kew Library needs doing up. All the shop fronts have been done up, except Kew Library. And it
sorry. Can I come
I'm
back
moving
to
on to Pensford. I'll get there. It's the path as well, down to the river. I used to work in the conservation bit of Kew Gardens, and to make a path there, it flooded in Kew Gardens in the conservation bit, so they got prisoners of war to fill sacks with cement, and they made a wall so Kew Gardens doesn't flood. But if you stand on the wall and look down at the golf course, it does flood, so maybe the council could do a deal whereby do something about the flooding and in exchange have the path.
I would just, if you could get your Pensford field.
Yes, okay. So having worked in the conservation bit, I was given the lease by the council for Pensford Field. So without taking money from the council, whenever we needed money, we'd have a competition, painting children. Someone was widowed and she paid for the order in memory of her husband. And so I feel really affronted. And I'm sorry Gareth Roberts isn't here, but it's very nice to see you. Because Gareth Roberts and Sir Mark Foley seem to be in connivance, and people say maybe it's the Freemasons, but I don't know about that. Because it was decided without discussing it to anybody. We were just told, plonk, Pensford Field's going to those of nature. Can you just let me speak?
Ask a question.
So, thank you.
So my question is, I don't understand how they can have the nerve to take the lease from hard-working volunteer committee and give it to a charity that could be anywhere. You could do mental welfare in the construction in North Sheen Rec.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Thank you very much for your question.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the lady that raised her question. You had a suite of questions, and go to the second question.
Thank you. So this is regarding Pensford Field. Now that the decision has yet to be made to award the lease to Dose of Nature, will the council accept that it is a key decision requiring committee approval that is evidently controversial?
Okay, let's see if I can...
That's an excellent question, and I will come back with you for the definitive answer, but I think it sounds like it might be something, but I don't know that for a fact. I can find out the answer for you.
So, can I just pick up the first Kew Library? I have raised that, and with the lady who actually lives above it, who's it is on the priority list to be redecorated because it really is an eyesore. Yeah. So in relation, so now I've lost. So I think what we can about Pensford Field is, yes, it should have been discussed with Pensford Field before the termination of the lease was issued. There is no, that's the long and the short of it. That didn't happen. Now the process has been set in motion, and now it's trying to sort it out, about how we can sort it out, how we can maintain the, as I said before, it's about maintaining the integrity of the natural space, as well as having a nature-based charity there. That's what I don't know that I can say anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I was just going to respond to the point that was made in the trinity of question about the potential path down to the river. I think that the challenge is, and I'm not dismissing it, the challenge is actually the flooding that you refer to is the golf course operating as it should, as a floodplain. And there really isn't a way of addressing, without a fundamentally different approach to flood management in that area, a way of ensuring that the golf course doesn't flood. And in fact, that's probably one of the issues that will be overcome, because a towpath that floods, or a towpath, a path to a towpath that floods would also obviously be not the most conducive facility either. And I think just on Pensford, I don't want to get too directly, I think Claire has answered it adequately, but you know, I think the point's been made, it's been minuted. I think that will definitely incorporate its way into the thinking of the council.
And actually, the rationale for why it didn't go to committee was because it didn't meet the financial threshold, and actually because there wasn't any proposed change to existing users, and that was in writing before.
So
that's why it didn't. So so the change wasn't considered to be substantial enough.
Thank you. We do. Sorry, I know that there's a bit of people wanting to move on or stay on, but I will. Excuse me. I want the field to be able to ask their third question, and then we do need to move on to talk about some of the other issues. Exactly, which is why I'm giving other topics. But over to the lady with the microphone.
Several freedom of information requests have been made by several people in this room, and all of them have been rejected on the basis that it's in the public interest not to disclose information. And I want to ask all the councillors in this room why they consider it appropriate for the council to continue to withhold information. Surely transparency over this issue could help clear it up, and it just feels like the council has something to hide.
I'll start. So I think the questions that have been asked and all the answers that you've received or not received. Please allow me to respond. I don't know those questions or those answers, but the key thing about the FOA process is it's governed by national legislation, and the officers operate it, not councillors. And so the officers are professional holders of the judgments over whether or not answers are given, and the grounds for refusal need to be disclosed as per the FOI legislation. I hope that those protocols have been followed, but as I say, I have no sight of them. So I would expect the council to uphold compliance with the law and to be as transparent as it can be. I can't speak to whether or not they have them.
Okay, thank you. I am going to move the discussion on. I know we've got some questions online on some of the other topics that were raised in advance to discuss. I think that the questions were important to raise again, and for the ward councillors to be able to respond as best they can at this point in time. Online question.
Thank you. We've got two here. One is around how long are the black and blue recycling boxes meant to last? This member of the public says, my old black box lasted nearly 15 years, but its replacement is cracking apart after less than 5 years. The old blue box is still going strong after nearly 2 decades.
Good point, I can ask about that. I don't know.
I don't know the answer to that question either, but I do know that the irony is of these plastic boxes is they themselves cannot be recycled. So that's something we're looking at as well.
I think the key thing to say is that however long they last, if you're in need of another one, it's possible to have one free of charge.
Yeah, we can just get it for you.
Just before that question, I know that Councillor Vollen wants to return to Pensford Field to say one last thing.
I did just want to say one more thing, because I think it has, because there are two issues. One is the process that the council has gone through, which has been full council, full answers have been given. You've requested Freedom of Information Act. I think the whole thing, so there's the process, there's also the what's the future for the field, and what, how we're going to move it forward. And I think it has been publicly acknowledged that the process could have been handled better. And as I said at the beginning, it should have been discussed with you before any of this started, and then we've ended up with sort of conspiracy theories, and that there's men meeting behind closed doors and making decisions. But really, we have to. My job is to represent the population of Kew and to look at what is going forward. What's the best for the field? What's the best for people with mental health issues? And can we find a way of resolving that issue rather than getting I mean, I think we'll have to be accountable at the process, that's fine, but it's more, we just need to look forward and we move it forward and resolve the issue.
And might I just say quite how robust Claire has been on behalf of the community with all of us within the council too, in making sure that that voice is brought to the discussion. So Claire's definitely been your champion.
And just in the interest of fairness, take one comment from the audience to balance out the return from the councillor.
I can tell you that I have been successful with an FOI inquiry with the council, because I was quite interested to know what other sites the council might have considered as being homes for Dose of Nature. And I think we all recognise Dose of Nature do good work. But equally well, the Borough of Richmond has got loads and loads of possible sites. So I asked, what sites did you consider? And I got the answer back that there were 2 sites that were considered. One was the park in Grimwood Road, and the other one was the Air Training Corps Centre next to it. And that was the limit of it. And you just think to yourself, there's 3,500 acres of parkland in the Royal Parks in Richmond, that surely that provide an absolutely suitable space for Dose of Nature to do their work.
Thank you. That sounds more like a statement than a question. But
well, I'll tell you what the question then is. Would the council like to tell us which sites, were any of you involved in looking at alternative sites, rather than just saying, do you know what, good people at Pensford Field, after 30 years, your term is over, now it's someone else's go. Are any of you aware of any sites that have been looked at?
I was not involved with the process at all.
I think in fairness though, I mean, I'm a ward councillor for St Margaret's, I would have been involved in that part of the process, so I think it wouldn't be that everyone would be involved in that conversation.
So anyone?
I've never seen anyone from...
Sorry, if we can, you don't have the microphone, so if we could just make sure we... Okay, I think there is an answer to that. I think
the only thing that I would say is, you know, I hear what you're saying about the parkland. I think it's the Royal Parks, and we have enough difficulty trying to get our voices heard there. We do have people on that. I have
inquiry to the Royal Parks.
I beg your pardon?
Would you like my FOE inquiry to the Royal Parks?
Oh, I didn't know you'd done one.
Yeah, you can ask the Royal Parks, and the Royal Parks said we've heard nothing from the Borough or Dose of Nature about finding a location for them.
Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't know that.
Okay.
But again, on that, I just think that we have no jurisdiction over the Royal Parks, that we need to find things from within our own jurisdiction. We wouldn't be able to go into the Royal Parks and provide the solution there.
But you could ask them.
Yeah, I suppose we could ask them. I'm just saying.
I think we could ask Dose of Nature which sites that they've been to, and which I have asked them which sites they've been to.
I think a range of health implications have been raised, and we'll get on the way.
Yeah.
Okay, I am going to move us now back onto this online question. Thank you very much for everyone's contributions on Pensford Field.
Thank you. Residents on Kew Road have asked that vehicles illegally parked on the pavement, meaning that the residents have to walk in the road. What do people affected do about it, and what can the council do about it?
Okay. Well, the first thing to say is, I mean, that's useful information. I haven't heard about particular issues on the Kew Road, so you know, these meetings are justified and valuable proposition, notwithstanding all the comments have been made already. So I think, in the first instance, as has been said earlier, on the council's website, if you put into Google or any other search engine, Richmond Enforcement telephone number, you'll be taken pretty promptly to the part of the website that details the telephone from which you can call in our civil enforcement officers, traffic wardens in old language, and they'll come in and issue tickets. And if there are specific concentration issues that are happening time and time again above and beyond individual instances, please do them with your ward councillors, who in turn, people like Claire, people like Nancy, people like Richard, raise them with me, and we can make sure that there's a different enforcement distribution of our officers to priority areas.
Great. Any other questions on the floor? We did have some topics that people wanted to talk about, particularly the public conveniences and community toilet scheme, as well as the deteriorating road and footpath conditions. Gentleman here at the front, just wait for the microphone, please.
Hello. Andrew Brown from Forest Road in Kew Ward. A major issue which Councillor Eman, I think, is aware of is the gridlocking around Kew Green and various proposals that have been kicking around for a very long time for no entry except for access controls of some sort to stop it going off the South Circular, bombing down Gloucester Road, onto Kew Green. They're causing logjam because they can't get out, endangering people in Gloucester Road, pedestrians, stopping emergency vehicles access from Kew Bridge to the whole of the area. And we've been strung along for a very long time. What is happening, please?
Quite a lot is the short answer. I'll give you the longer answer than that. The longer answer is we've engaged significantly with residents about this issue to make sure that we understood what residents wanted to see solved, because obviously there are a range of transport-related issues in that road network. Having done so, we've worked up proposals which we broadly shared with residents about the typology of thing that we would institute, which would be a camera-enforced restriction. The issue, if I might just finish the point, the issue has been, and the delay has been, as we put out early on in the process, signage, DFT authorised signage into a scheme that will make it enforceable has some practical difficulties in and around the Kew Green area, with resident objections about sighting, size and design. We've had to work those through. My understanding is we are quite close to having resolution to the issues, and we'll then come forward with proposals.
Can I return to the gentleman, please?
Thank you for that. The issues of signage, the council has embraced a scheme involving cameras and permits for residents over particular stretches and so on, and I believe that's what's going to come forward.
Yep.
A no entry except for access scheme, 24 hours, would solve the main issue of rat runners being routed back by the sat-navs.
Engaging with residents.
Sorry, if I just finish this. And if you do a no entry except for access, that doesn't stop anyone going in there to park, to go to the shops, to do whatever they want to do in the area. It means they can't just bomb through the area. And if they're not to do it by their sat-navs, they probably wouldn't. And yet you now seem to be considering a scheme which involves quite a lot of capital expenditure for cameras and so on, and would involve far more signage, as well as residents being inconvenienced to have to register their vehicles.
We looked at a range of options, and one of the key things to ensure was that there was a correct balance between a proposal that had significant deterrent effect on neighbours that people wanted, that maximised resident utility and access, and that was enforceable. And I think the issue with I'm happy to look in detail again and double check that there's not something beyond my understanding on this, but that particular signage I don't believe would be enforceable with cameras, and therefore compliance levels would be extraordinarily low. And actually, if you have a restriction access, I don't believe it's possible to specifically in signage terms have that exemption. The issue is that we've come up with a proposal amongst a range of options we discussed with residents, and the preferred option is the one that we're proceeding with through consultation. So I accept that different residents will have different views on what their preference is, but the council at the end of the day have to make a decision. We can't continue to foster 7 different versions of the same solution.
So just one last thing, not so much a question, but the final statement. You seem so
Just a slight problem about no entry except we all observe street signs. You know, there's a
I'm
no
afraid
entry
people
sign
don't.
in various places. If you go through a no entry, you know you're doing wrong. So no entry except for access is quite clear. It's visible on the other side of Kew Bridge, Hounslow have it going around Green Dragon Lane, and it will deter the vast majority of people, and that's the problem. Enforcement could be done with mobile phones. It could just be in spot occasional enforcement. Nobody's enforcing things that say you mustn't go the wrong way up Leybourne Park all the time. But most people don't do it. So I think a scheme should be introduced, just to see what happens. And you're intent on doing something that involves a lot more consultation, and this has been going on for a very long time.
It was, as I say, it was where the balance of views were on the range of options presented to a range of residents. I accept entirely that you have a different view.
Thank you.
It was part of the deal. all along, no entry except for access has been suggested as a fallback if you're not...
All options were considered and discussed with residents, and it's fair to say that the option that we are developing is the one that had the most support.
Okay, moving on. The gentleman just behind, hand up.
Thank you. Questions about provision of electric vehicle charging points. The street I live in, which is St John's Road, and the connecting road, Larkfield Road, there are no electric vehicle charging points. And as far as I can see, all the lamps in those streets are on the wrong side of the road. So the common option in the borough of providing charge points and lampposts would appear to be not viable. My question is, what's the plan for areas like the place I live for actually giving us an option of having an electric vehicle charging point?
So,
is there a plan?
Yeah, so I mean, the first say, being a politician, I've got to start with positives. The first thing to say is that Richmond Borough have the highest number of electric charge points of any outer London borough. That's a matter of fact. So we've done very well on the provision. Now, except that there will be pockets of places where that provision isn't as strong. I guess one of the things to say is that not everybody has to charge their vehicle on the road they live on. There is a facility within the parking neighbouring roads, should parking facilities, of course, be available. The other thing council do is recognise it's not all about lamppost charging. Some of it's about making sure where people can charge off street and have driveways, that's obviously an option. And we've actually reduced the requirements related to crossovers so that people can do that more freely. We're also about to launch from going through a pilot gully charging opportunities as well. So where you can't park in your front garden, we are, as a council, allowing you to have a facility built under the pavement for you to have your charging cable run out into the road, so there's not an obstruction to pedestrians or other users, and you are providing the spaces available and legally compliant outside your home. So there's a mix of things that people are doing. I think what I would say is that EV charging infrastructure isn't the sole preserve of the council. We're doing an awful lot, we're right at the lead of the pack, but the private sector has a role to play too. I mean, the combustion engine is serviced by petrol stations, not the council's infrastructure.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a question at the back.
Thank you. So we've heard about cars and looking after them, and we've heard about traffic control. Somebody did mention pavements. Perhaps I can just pursue that. I mean, we're lucky. We live in a leafy area. There are lots of trees, particularly on this side of Kew over here, as you know. And the trouble is, the roots get everywhere. I'm so familiar with this problem because I have a son who lives in New Orleans, and we have huge trees there, all the pavement up. When you walk down the pavements of Kew, there are these strange hieroglyphs which appear from time to time, and nobody knows what they mean. And sometimes you can't see why they're there, but you can see places where you wish they were there. And I wonder what the council is doing about improving the pavements. We do see occasionally new pavement stones being put in, but it is a continuing problem, and it is particularly exaggerated when refurbishment is going on of houses. And pavements are destroyed, and they're on campus, and they're very dangerous. The other thing about Kew is that people are getting older here, and they worry more and more about falling. And walking down some of the streets, there's a death trap for some of them. What's being done about
So there's a couple of things there. I mean, there's quite a few things within that question. I mean, those hieroglyphics you refer to them, there are roving officers, for want of an expression, who are out and about in the borough all the time observing where there are pavement defects, marking them for remedial repairs. So remedial repairs should be undertaken to make sure that they're made safe. But the issue is you can't keep patching the network any more than you can just keep patching the road network, which is why the council took the decision as recently as this year to commit substantial extra funds to roads and pavements. So in pavement terms, we've doubled the amount that we're spending per year, and in Kew committee in about less than a week's time, I think Cumberland Road and Defoe Avenue are marked out as being proposed footways will be completely refurbished. There's a very, very long list borough-wide, all of the extra pavements that are being refurbished as a result of this additional money. is £21 million of additional money over the next 3 years going into roads and pavements. So I hope the residents will see a material improvement in both the condition of roads and pavements in Kew and more broadly in the borough. The challenge is, you know, and mea culpa to the extent that this administration under this political queue has had control of this agenda since 2018, but the truth is most administrations don't tackle this issue because when you look in detail, as I have, and asked officers to tackle this, the figures are frankly eye-watering. It's decades and decades of underinvestment by, it doesn't matter what political colour a council it was, but this council, I really believe, and I hope you will see it in the coming years, is getting to grips with the underfunding, and that's why we've committed these extraordinary sums of money to both roads and pavements. I hope in the coming years we'll see those improvements.
Councillor Wallen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that people raised with me, and I have raised it and put in a query about sort of at what point does the mountainous pavement override the tree?
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
And it's a really big issue. You suggest to anybody that you're going to cut down a tree, you know you're in big trouble. But you say to a disabled person who can't get down their road in their wheelchair or bike, you know, well, the tree takes priority over you. So it's a very live and a very difficult issue. And somebody earlier on mentioned the issue of the disabled sort of step-free route from Kew station around, which is a very long and circuitous route, involves going up over the bridge and nobody can find it, etc. And Kew Society are working hard to try and at least get that route signposted. On the way, a couple of trees which have a slight mountainous bit of pavement, and we're going to have to look at all of that, but it's with great reluctance that anybody cuts a tree down, and it's a hard nut to crack.
I should say, well, Claire's not done herself full justice there as well. I mean, Claire has championed the case through the conversations we've had with her and her colleagues about where to prioritise that money, and recognising there's a real opportunity in trying to improve the pavement infrastructure between both entrances of the Kew tube station as well. So we are trying to concentrate also what are still finite resources on the pavement priorities that matter. I would just say one last thing. There's also a separate process we're developing called the pedestrian pilot at the moment, where we're identifying what are basically the principal roads for pedestrians. There isn't an A and B road classification for pedestrians, but through a lot of background work that we've been doing, we've been able to come up with some really, really good analysis that demonstrates where there is the most footfall and the most, therefore, utility in providing a better pedestrian infrastructure. And later this year, probably the autumn of this year, we'll also separately from all of the investment we're making in roads and pavements, we'll come forward with some trial measures in relation to those corridors as well, which I hope will yield some benefits.
Could I just mention something? I know that the preponderance of people in this audience this evening are Kew residents, but it's not like North Richmond is getting nothing and that we do nothing for our residents, because this is a very live issue, and I hear what you're saying, because I've had a lot of residents who've had accidents on the pavements, and I know that for myself, I walk the pavements regularly, and anything that looks even a bit dodgy, I report straight away, and we do get them repaired. And we were very lucky, and I wanted to thank Councillor Amon for this, the extra money coming to some of our pavements and streets that are going to make it better. So I'm assuming that most of North Richmond is watching on the live stream tonight, but we are working with identifying the pavements and the walkways. And as you say, we've got older residents, and it becomes an equality issue after a while that older people aren't allowed to go out safely to walk. And so I know that's something that I spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
Thank you, councillors. I would just like to go to the law. Can I check these are about that issue as we're kind of getting stuck into it? Is this about...
It's about charging points. I'd just like to ask one question there.
Can I come back to you? Just is there anyone who's got... Okay, and is there anyone that wants to follow up the footpath issue? So we've got about 5 minutes left of questions, so I'm going to take that question quickly. We can get a microphone here.
Thank you. With the exception of pavements immediately adjacent to trees, the quick
and cheap option of repairing cracked paving is often patch repairing with tarmac. So the question is there a council policy about repairs using matching materials as opposed to the cheaper option of filling in with tarmac, creates a patchwork of unattractive patchwork?
So yes, but it's important to understand that there are different things happening at different times. So when we have a pavement that is dysfunctional to a point dangerous, the immediate priority is to make safe. And that means that we do use non-ideal materials like the materials you described, just to make sure that people are not going to have a trip hazard. And what should then follow is a wider repair, which makes that good, but with materials, the appropriate materials later. We've employed recently a new senior officer for this area of operation, and I've given him a very clear instruction that this is an area where I see underperformance, because we should try and fix first time well. And that's not always going to be possible. Some of those instances will still remain where we have to use materials that are not ideal. But I am working towards, and he is developing plans to upskill the workforce and plans and processes that will ensure that wherever possible those works will be conducted with the right material at this time, and that also we have a clearer connect between those remedial works and secondary timescales associated with where they are required to be done in 2 stages, with the actual eventual more permanent with the correct materials. So it's a live issue. We must do better on it. I apologise for the fact that for periods of time the road network, pavement network, doesn't reflect the correct materials that it should. But the first priority is to make sure that injuries are not occurring.
Thank you, Councillor. Just returning to the question on electric charge points. We don't have long, but...
I'm delighted to live in a street in which 3 electricity charge points were installed about 18 months ago. Sadly, 2 of them now don't work. What relationship do you have with the suppliers into your lamppost to make sure that these charging points actually work? They've sent an engineer round to stick a sticker on it that says that this charging point doesn't work. We hoped he might have fixed it rather than attached a sticker.
Well, I can take that away if you want to come up to me afterwards. I'll take the details of those locations. But we can't make those repairs. That's not our infrastructure. But we can demand that the provider of those services do. I have to be honest, it has been an issue throughout the previous incumbents' ownership of those assets, and I'm sorry to hear that it seems to be under the subsequent. We can only press for more, and obviously that may well have an effect on whether we want to continue using this provider in the future if they fail to fulfil key KPIs on repairs.
What do you want to know, the lamppost number?
Yeah, well, just come up afterwards and give me the details of the location of the officers.
Thank you.
Lovely. And I will take one last question. I'm sorry we didn't get spend too much time on toilets, but one question on them. Oh, sorry, microphone coming.
You have the community loo scheme, but that only works if it's a shop and if it's during the day. There used to be loos under Waitrose that were controlled by the council, and they closed them down. I'm sure they could be pushed and used again. Even Waitrose have closed their loos, so it's but I just want to know why there are no loos that the council will maintain. Because there were some where there's a flower market and they filled those in. And then they closed the ones at Waitrose. So, I mean, we need loos in the centre of town.
Couldn't agree more, as a woman of a certain age. Yeah, I mean, the provision of toilets has gone downhill recently. And the thing is, you mentioned the ones at Waitrose, but quite frankly, you had to go downstairs to get to them. So in some respects, they weren't all that useful to people who had small children, or if you were in any way handicapped or anything else. The idea is to be able to provide rest stop areas, I'll put it that way, that are accessible, that people can get into. So that's why we've been working really hard on a community toilet scheme where we get businesses and organizations, and that can be anything from a shop to a pub or whatever, so that you're able to go in there and use their facilities. I guess the virtue of that is that these places already exist. They're usually accessible for people who use wheelchairs or mothers with prams and that sort of thing. I do believe that there are plans to put more, I guess, purpose-built ones around the area. But I hear exactly what you're saying. I think there's been a real, I've got it here somewhere. We started out with 42 and we're something over 70 different locations in the borough. And we're always working on trying to get more of those community toilet schemes working. So I absolutely hear you, and it's something we need to work on.
Councillor Mansfield, last word of the evening.
Thank you. So firstly, the community toilet scheme does have a place. It's really important that it's there because we can't possibly put enough toilets in across the borough, and it enables us to be in places that we wouldn't be able to put toilets in. It's not just in shops. There are pubs, restaurants and things like that. We always try to make it as available as possible, both in terms of abilities, in terms of hours and in terms of access. So it is a really important part of the proposition that we put out. We do recognise that there are times and places where there have to be actual toilets, and there are some of the parks that we need to do that, and there are some places like Richmond Town Centre that we recognise that does need to be the case. It is part of what we're looking at going forward. We have to find the right, I think the gentleman at the back who spoke earlier was talking about one potential place, but we have to find the place that's the right place that people want it to be, and that is accessible and that we can use. So it will be part of what we look at going forward.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that does bring us to the end of our time tonight. I would like to thank everyone here for attending and being part of this conversation. I'd like to just add that we have some feedback forms at the back. Please do take a moment to tell us what you think of this forum, how it could be improved potentially, because that will help us going forward. The last thing for me to do is to thank the council and their kind of research and sharing this evening. It felt like a nice question to me. I know not everyone is going away with everything resolved, but we've had the conversation. So thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you.